Welcome to The Authority File, the podcast that features conversations about the life cycle of scholarly communication. I'm Bill Mickey, the editorial director at Choice. We talk a lot about open access on this podcast, and models for open access monographs are an especially interesting topic for us. We've been fortunate enough to have MIT Press guest for several series to talk about its direct-to-open program, a collective funding model that opens the press's monographs across STEM and the humanities. Over the last few years, we've talked about its origins, launch, and progress, but no matter who we're talking to regarding open access, we typically only speak anecdotally about one of the most important participants in OA monograph publishing, researchers themselves. Well, that changes with this four-part series underwritten by our friends at MIT Press, where we discuss the benefits that authors see from publishing their texts via the direct-to-open model, and some of these benefits might be ones you haven't thought of. Joining me in this series are Dr. Janaki Srinivasan, Associate Professor of Digital South Asian Studies at the University of Oxford's Internet Institute and author of The Political Lives of Information. David Kunkel, Professor of Media Studies at Northern Illinois University and author of Person, Thing, Robot, a 2024 Choice Outstanding Academic Title. And Amy Harris, MIT Press Senior Manager, Library Relations and Sales. In this final episode of our series, Amy and Janaki talk about how international OA can drive translation and licensing conversations, how it benefits research disciplines more broadly, and we'll hear some forward-looking thoughts on MIT's D2O program. Okay, so in the previous episode, we talked a lot about the sort of international benefits of open access. So how can international OA drive translation and or licensing conversations? Amy, as a publisher, are you seeing any movement here?
So yes, I should preface this by saying we know from the usage data that our direct open books reach a wide international readership, but keep in mind that the people who read the works are mostly researchers, students, educators, not publishers. And when you're talking about licensed translation as opposed to open translation, it's the publishing community, the business end that we're working with. And as you can imagine, as businesses, they're also typically evaluating books in terms of what they think they can sell. So the majority of our active translation licensing is for our trade or general interest books and our textbooks rather than our open research monographs. That said, there's a juicy MIT Press story about a professional research monograph in computer science that was a blockbuster hit for the press in the 2010s. It's Deep Learning by Ian Goodfellow, Joshua Benigo, and Aaron Corville. And this was not a direct to open book. It predated the program by some years, but the authors composed the book chapter by chapter and published the drafts in their own hosted environment. Essentially, they were pre-printing and they did open peer review. This book was eventually acquired by one of the press's legendary computer science editors, Marie Lee. And she told us early on, this is a game-changing, field-defining work. And in fact, the chapter by chapter release, the pre-printing and open peer review drove a massive amount of interest and advanced excitement about the book. As a result, we had publishers reaching out to us about licensing translations, and we signed 14 early translation language licenses in 14 different languages, which ultimately resulted in hundreds of thousands of additional global readers.
Wow, that's amazing. It's kind of like in the music industry releasing a couple singles in advance of an album or something. Yeah, that's interesting how that worked out that way.
Yes, well, we love experiments in things like preprinting and open peer review, overlay journals. We do it all,
Mm-hmm.
and it's fascinating to me to watch how that impacts research. And this is a really exceptional case. I think, again, this is a book that a lot of people were waiting for, but it's very helpful, and you just never know, what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So, Amy, just sticking with you for a minute, beyond the accessibility and affordability, which we've talked about, what are some of the other benefits for students and researchers to engage, with OA content in ways that benefits, various disciplines more broadly?
Yes. So I recall having a conversation with the marvelous Charla Lair of Lyrasis early on when we were talking about direct to open and talking about the license agreement. And she told me as we were reviewing interlibrary loan clauses and information about things like whether or not you can put work in an LMS for the paywalled books that come as a free benefit of direct to open. She turned to me and she said, someday we won't have to talk about any of this because the works will all be open and you won't have any questions about whether or not you can share the work or how you can share the work. They'll all be Creative Commons licensed and it'll be very clear. With the open access works and direct to open, professors don't have to worry about whether or not if they upload the work into an LMS, they have to delete it after the course. We've all seen these licenses that have provisions about sharing, and
Hmm.
open sharing is huge. I have a story. One of our authors, Georg Streiter, he is using his book, Model Systems in Biology, in his courses, and he's able to upload it into Perusal, which actually allows him to engage with the work differently with his students. I think it's been widely reported in outlets like the Chronicle of Higher Ed and Inside Higher Ed that professors are having trouble getting students to read text. Any barriers, like having to buy a $150 textbook,
Of course.
or um, you know, not being able to learn in a way that fits your learning style is a barrier to entry. It's something that keeps students from engaging with material and learning.
Hmm.
So this is something we know is helping with teaching in addition to research.
Right. Janicki, anything that's been talked about right here that interests you in particular, or anything you want to add?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking, I've been on both sides of this in a sense because
Hmm.
I'm also a researcher who's reading other open access books, right? So, it definitely makes things much easier, and definitely in teaching as well. Learning management system, or you just want your students to pick up some part of something you're reading. You don't sort of have to figure out where and navigate how they're going to get access to that book. You just send out a link, and in fact, sort of coming back to my author hat, this is also my first book, so I'm just also realizing that I'm probably a little spoiled because I thought this is how they did it almost, right? When I'm thinking back to it now, which is when my book was first released and you're reaching out to people with it, it was really simple for me to just link and say, here's the book, rather than send that sort of teaser along saying, oh, well, and then ask your library to order it, which I did, but I said, you can also access it here, right?
Hmm.
So there are many ways in which you can engage with these ideas. And for a lot of my students, and I used to teach till recently in India, for a lot of my students, it comes clicking on a link comes more natural than you know the copies or scans that I might have handed them out earlier. So I can, like Amy said, put it on an LMS, put it in a class message, and just sort of I don't want to create yet another barrier to them reading, right? So I make the parts that can be simplified, I simplify them. And I think this is definitely one way of getting at that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like students in general these days are probably just so device oriented that, they're learning and taking notes and researching on a device rather than, switching modalities or whatever into a print format. So I imagine this would make things, in terms of, engagement and interaction with a title a little bit facilitate that more easily. Amy, back to you. I'm wondering if you could, just give us a preview of your 2025 impact report, and really talk about what's ahead for D2O.
Oh, yes, of course. So we continue to see significant usage and citation advantages, like I mentioned, for our
Hmm.
direct to open books, which is something that pretty much all publishers publishing open access books have observed. But what's so fun about the process of updating this report are the stories that we hear from authors like Janicki and David, who was on our previous programs. Uh, Thanks from grateful students who are able to pursue their studies independent scholars who are able to do their research because a work is open and accessible, reports from new scholarly communities that coalesce to take a field in new directions because they're able to access the content together, and emails from our authors telling us that open access helped them reach an important audience outside of academia. In the future, we really want to work hard to do more of the same and sustain the program because, as a nonprofit university based press, we really feel like we're serving the academy and the public best when we're working to make important ideas and high quality scholarship more accessible. So this month, we're working on trying to get things started for our 2026 direct open funding cycle, get the impact report out. I'm trying to move fast to catch US and UK libraries before the end of their fiscal year. I would just say that if you're a librarian or consortia and you have questions about direct to open, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. It's always wonderful to hear from you.
Excellent. Before we close, there's just one quick question. I'm wondering if you could, and if not, that's okay, but if there was any unanticipated benefits, like some surprises along the way around, that you discovered with the D2O program.
Boy, unexpected benefits. We certainly, since we went in with, about 20 plus years, and now this year it's officially 30 years of publishing open access books.
Hmm.
We had already observed a lot of the benefits, knowing that works were getting out there faster, that, again, they were being cited more. Uh, I think that if anything, it's been reports of, for example, authors writing to say, Rolling Stone got in touch with me because they read my open access work online. Our publicists probably couldn't have dreamed of, setting up that spot for an open access monograph on, earthquakes and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But yes, it's been, for the most part, a lot of the things have been expected. But it's the fun stories that come out of it, like the
Right.
reading group that coalesced around an open work.
Exactly. How about on the funding side of it, in terms of what you're hearing from participating libraries?
Well, I am really kind of honored to say that the feedback from libraries has been incredibly positive.
Hmm.
I, have immense gratitude for the libraries that have taken this journey with us. It really, a lot of folks went on a limb with us. This was something that was pretty bold and new and different, and our libraries really showed up to
Hmm.
support us. I, continue to work to try to make sure that this program has value for them, because again, we think that this is the best way to publish these works, and we want to continue doing it.
Fantastic. Well, Amy, Janicki, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You just heard from Dr. Janicki Srinivasan, Associate Professor of Digital South Asian Studies at the University of Oxford's Internet Institute and author of The Political Lives of Information, and Amy Harris, MIT Press Senior Manager, Library Relations and Sales. This episode was brought to you with generous support from MIT Press. As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising director, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant, Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.